Okay, folks, we are at 1 o'clock. Let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our DCO SOSEC Cyber Talk. My name is Ed Aguirre. I am the SOSEC LNO Supporting Defense Cyber Operations, otherwise known as DCO. DCO is one of SOSEC's 9 U.S. government sponsors. This OTA is under the Defense Cyber Operations COBRA contract vehicle at PEO EIS IEWNS. This is our 5th year co-hosting the Cyber Talks. Today, our host consortium member is Axellio. And today you'll hear from the Axellio leadership, who has chosen to include 2 strategic teaming partners, including Garland Technology and Mira Security. The event title is TLS 1.3 Encryption, Gaining Data Security, but Losing Security Visibility. So let me add here that teaming is an OTA inclusive and best practice, often seen as favorable by our OTA acquisition sponsor teams. Teaming can result in closing gaps, enhancing existing or proposed customer baseline capabilities, and possibly cost reduction and or expedient delivery of innovations, which may not generally be available competitively or anywhere else. The point is, teaming is a good business practice, and this should be regularly considered by traditional and non-traditional consortium and industry companies. SOSEC, our government sponsors, and the SOSEC OTA specifically encourage the inclusion of teaming where appropriate. So just keep that in mind as you consider OTAs as they are coming across your desks for consideration. Today we have a great lineup of speakers. Your speakers are Mr. Scott Aiken, Axellio CEO and board member, Mr. Chris Bahari, Garland Technology CEO and co-founder, and Mr. David Wells, Mira Security product strategist and co-founder. An important element for these cyber talks is engagement and audience participation. So during this talk, please use your Zoom chat feature to ask questions. So if you would, select your chat button at the bottom of your screens, mention your name and your company names. And if you're with government or a contractor, if you like, provide some abstraction of who you're with. So for example, if you're with NSA, you could use Fort Meade. If you're with CAD or CPS, you could use DCO. If you're with Army Cyber, you could use Fort Eisenhower, et cetera, et cetera. And so for the next few minutes, let our co-host know who's participating in the event. And let me add, you're welcome to use private chat as well. Or again, questions in chat are welcome. And also just consider using private chat to communicate with anybody on this forum, and private conversations are okay. Our host teams will be monitoring for your questions in chat, so they'll bring up your questions either during the talk or at the end when Q&A comes up. So I want to remind everyone, except for our speakers, keep your microphones muted and cameras off during the talk. Axellio and their guest teams will have an open mic at the end of the talk. When that time comes, if you have a question, unmute yourself, introduce yourself and your company name, and ask your question. At the end of the Q&A, I have a few things to say about the SOSEC consortium. So we'll get to that point not too long from now. But at this point, I'd like to turn the mic over to Scott Aiken, CEO and board member at Axellio. Scott, over to you.
All right, thank you, Ed. And to SOSEC. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and also appreciate those that are joining us today online. We're going to try and keep you entertained with some riveting encryption discussion for the next hour or so, and we'll kind of go into questions after the talk is over. But today we're joined, as Ed said, by Garland and Mira. we're going to discuss the TLS 1.3 encryption paradox and discuss how strengthening our end-to-end encryption with TLS 1.3 to see if we're also limiting our cybersecurity monitoring capabilities. We'll get to questions towards the end, but please do, once again, feel free to use that chat box. We'll answer the ones that we can during the talk through the chat. If there's some of them we need to talk about in detail, we'll pull those together at the end to make sure that we're keeping this flowing. But let's first start by introducing the team. So today I'm joined by two incredible technology leaders and real SMEs in this field. So you're in for a real treat. The first is David Wells. He's the founder and the product and technology strategist at Mira. He has decades of experience in networking, cybersecurity, wireless technologies, and standards development. So welcome, David.
Thanks, Scott. Good to be here. And as Scott says, I've been around for a long time doing lots of tech stuff, but in terms of TLS visibility, which is the subject we're talking about today, I was one of the co-founders of Metronome a long time ago now, and we built our first TLS visibility product in 2010. And since then, I've taken that product through Bluecoat and Symantec, and now it's back in Mira, which is a spin-off of Metronome. And our key focus is just providing visibility into TLS traffic, no matter where it is or how you want to do that in the network. So I'm looking forward to today's presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, David. And also joining us is Chris Bahari, who's the CEO of Garland. Chris has over 20 years experience driving solutions for better visibility and network access. Welcome, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Scott and David. Look forward to talks today. And as everybody said, my name is Chris Bahari. I'm the CEO, co-founder of Garland Technology. And, in our tagline, we say, see every bit, byte, packet. And, one of the things I always like to say is that the truth is in the packets. So, one of the things when you look at performance monitoring, security monitoring, our belief is that it's very important to figure out the best way to, get traffic, off the network for monitoring and security purposes. And, we do a lot in terms of figuring out how to instrument networks in a way to effectively monitor. So really excited about today and, focusing on how you can get visibility into TLS 1.3. So Scott and David, looking forward to our conversations.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate you both joining us today. And as Ed said up front, my name is Scott Aiken. I'm the CEO of Axellio. I've also spent a couple decades in the cybersecurity space, both on the commercial and the government side. And for those of you who haven't heard of Axellio before, we're a small, innovative, non-traditional U.S. defense business. We're based in Colorado Springs, and our mission is to control data overload in time series analysis systems. We do this through innovative storage and distribution software. And we were fortunate enough back in 2020 to be awarded through SOSEC our first Army contract, which was the Garrison Defensive Cyber Operations Platform V3 prototype contract. Most of you know this as GDP V3. Since then, we've continued to support PMDCO through 3 other contracts, all through SOSEC, and are currently executing on the GDP V4 contract today. And still supporting V3 and V4. So our software allows our customers to redefine how they do collections and analysis. The software offers simultaneous read-write capabilities at over 100 gigabit per second in a off-the-shelf one-use server. So we'll get into some of the details and how all that works later on, and how that is working for particular solution that we're going to talk to you today with Garland and Mira. But let's get going and get into some of the meat here. I think you'll all agree that secure end-to-end data encryption is essential to safeguard our data. However, this encryption creates a paradox. That same encryption that safeguards our data also limits our visibility to our cybersecurity solutions, network monitoring tools, forensics, and all kinds of tools that we could probably list for the next couple hours. Prior to TLS 1.3 coming on the scene, most organizations were generally able to monitor and analyze their encrypted content that are originated or terminated in their network. For instance, with TLS 1.2, this was easily achievable if you didn't have forward secrecy enabled. But with 1.3, things got significantly more challenging. TLS 1.3 has forward secrecy set as a default, and this requires a fundamental change to the approach you need to take to monitor your infrastructure, things that are critical for you to have for your cybersecurity needs. We've seen many reports of organizations wanting to enhance their security, offered by 1.3 because it has some really great tools in it. They've implemented it and then needed to back it out because they didn't fully understand all the ramifications to their monitoring infrastructure. We're here to try and help you understand the challenges and offer up some potential solutions as well. So let's get to some questions. The first is for David. Based on your experience over years building and implementing encryption technology, why is decrypting traffic so essential for security monitoring?
Thanks, Scott. Well, I think the primary reason today is that anything that matters is encrypted. So if you go back 15 years, 10-20% of the network was TLS traffic. Today, 90x% of it is encrypted, and anything that matters is encrypted. And TLS does a very good job. I mean, it provides end-to-end security as well as authentication that you're talking to the server you think you're talking to. So that's good for the end user. But as you say, it makes life a lot harder for security operations. And in some ways, it makes it easier for malign actors. It's easier to hide attacks inside encrypted traffic. And if an attack's successful, then you can hide the effect of the attack, the exfiltration of data, because, again, that's encrypted. And it won't be seen by most of your existing security tools. So you gain the benefits, but you suffer the drawbacks, as you already outlined. Without the ability to look at the unencrypted data that's flowing across your network, you lose multiple capabilities. Your security functions such as malware detection, phishing detection, data loss prevention, almost all of them will either not work at all, or they're very limited in the capabilities they can offer unless you can see inside the encrypted traffic. So the bottom line in an enterprise today is, if you don't have visibility into encrypted traffic, you're flying blind. And it makes it much harder for security as well as for fault finding and troubleshooting as well.
Okay, so SSL and TLS have been around for, 15, 20 years now. And we've been able to decrypt those protocols as long as we had control over either the server or the client. Is that right?
Right. So SSL and TLS are both secure in that you can't do an uncontrolled man-in-the-middle attack on them. So any mechanism to get visibility into TLS requires you have some level of control, either over the server or over the client. And what changed with TLS 1.3 significantly was the ways that you could do that. So if you're looking to inspect traffic that is to a server you control, it's relatively straightforward. You can get a copy of the server certificate and private key. You can load that into the box that's going to do decrypt, and it can use that to decrypt traffic. And with TLS 1.2, it could do that when it was working on a copy of the traffic. So it would just be better copy from a network tap. For traffic in the other direction, so your employees talking to servers that you don't control, then you have to use a different technique because you can't get that server's certificate and private key, so you have to do certificate resign, and that means that for outbound traffic, you always have to be physically in line because you're going to modify the traffic between the client and the server during the TLS handshake. But for 1.2, for the inbound use case at least, you could do things passively. And with TLS 1.3, that capability disappeared because all of the cipher suites in 1.3 provide perfect forward secrecy, which means you can't work on a copy of the traffic. Unless you're present during the handshake between the client and server, you'll never be able to decrypt it, even if you have the server key and certificate. And that was the big change. It's a beneficial change, but it does mean that you have to work harder and you can't work on a copy of the traffic anymore. So yes, I mean, TLS 1.3 made things change quite a bit.
Okay, so over to you, Chris. How have the TLS versions prior to 1.3 that allowed passive known server key inspection influenced our monitoring approach?
Yeah, so Scott, you know, prior to 1.3, you know, our focus in terms of, you know, getting access to data, we'd utilize technologies like network taps, aggregators, packet brokers, and so, you know, at Garland, we're a, you know, U.S. manufacturer of this equipment. And if you haven't used a network tap in the past, so if you want to get a copy of traffic from your network and you wanted to be able to feed that into a decryption solution, you could take a, you know, anywhere from, you know, 1 gig up to 100 gig network tap. And the way a tap works is you insert it in between 2 network devices. So let's just say we have a router and a switch, or you know, router firewall, and you want to be able to monitor that traffic and decrypt it. One of the steps is you can insert a wiretap in between those 2 network devices. The tap itself has no IP address, no MAC address, so it's you know, invisible to the network, and its whole job is to copy the traffic. So Scott, you and I are talking. We put a tap in between us. It's going to copy everything you say and everything I say. So same concept on the network is you can utilize you know, passive monitoring techniques to deploy your decryption solution. So if you were to you know, tap several links within your network, then, you know, generally the philosophy would be to bring it into an aggregator or packet broker, which at that point you can you know, take that traffic to your decryption solution and do it all out of band. So again, this is you know, 100% out of band monitoring, and so this was achievable prior to 1.3. So I think a lot of people are, you know, used to, you know, installing intrusion detection systems, or maybe installing, you know, a network detection response, or, you know, different types of security tools, or obviously, right, with Axellio, packet capture, right? So, you know, if you want to guarantee that you're going to get all the traffic from the network, you know, the only way to do that is, you know, starting with a tap philosophy, because if you're using span mirror ports, if you're using that to get a copy of your traffic, you know, span mirror ports can be, you know, misconfigured. You know, they can be dropped. You know, there could be drop packets because you can oversubscribe. So strategy wise, you know, we would always look at implementing a network tap infrastructure and a aggregator or packet broker solution to be able to take that data, decrypt it out of band, and then you know, obviously send it to your security and monitoring solutions.
So it looks like, Ed, I see your message here that Mehdi has a question. Question out there, or we want to save it to the end? All right, well, we'll move on, save it to the end then. Okay, so in previous SSL and TLS versions, the attackers could then capture the encrypted traffic, store it on their own, and then decrypt it later once the server had been compromised, so its private key was stolen, and then to be able to decrypt everything after the fact. So we totally understandable why 1.3 was developed to prevent this. So David, what's the difference? What's different in 1.3 to stop our adversaries from grabbing the encrypted traffic, decrypting it later down the line? And also, what can enterprises do to retain visibility into their own network traffic?
Okay, both good questions, Scott. I guess the primary difference with TLS 1.3 is that it prevents the problem you outlined that TLS 1.2 had with RSA key exchange, which is that if you could capture encrypted flows a week ago, a month ago, whenever, and then compromise the server that those flows went to and get its private certificate and key, then you could decrypt all that historic traffic. And if the breach wasn't detected, you could decrypt all future traffic as well until the server certificate and private key changed. The big difference in TLS 1.3 is that they don't use RSA key exchange at all. So it's all Diffie-Hellman key exchange mechanism. And that effectively means that for each individual TLS session, the session keys that are used to do the encryption are calculated during the TLS handshake, but the only way you can determine what they are is if you participate in that handshake. In other words, if you just have a copy of the handshake off the wire and you have the server's certificate and private key, it doesn't let you do anything because you can't figure out what the ephemeral symmetric keys are that are being used to encrypt that individual flow. So the only way that you can get visibility into a TLS flow that's got perfect forward secrecy is to be between the client and the server when the handshake takes place. And then effectively the client sees you as being the server sees you as being the client, and you participate actively in the TLS handshake. And at the end of that process, you know what the ephemeral keys, the symmetric keys are that are being used to encrypt the payloads for that specific flow. And in fact, in almost all cases, the fact that you have a decryption device between the client and the server means that there are two distinctly separate TLS sessions, because the session keys that will be used on the session between the client and the decryption box are guaranteed to be different from the session keys that are used between the decryption box and the server. So unless you're there during the handshake, you have no hope of ever decrypting this. If you are there during the handshake, then you can do real-time decryption. You've got the session keys. You can decrypt traffic from the client and get the plain text. You can re-encrypt traffic and send it onto the server with a different set of session keys and do the reverse for traffic from the server to the client. So you gain visibility, but the cost of that is you're actively in line between the client and the server. You're a physical bump in the wire. So it's no longer copies of the traffic you're working on, it's the real traffic. And that means that if your decryption device ever fails, it takes the network down because it's in the live network as a bump in the wire. So that's the big difference, and that has implications for how you architect the network. And I think Chris will talk about that in a second. But the other thing it's worth saying is that today, probably just over 50% of traffic is TLS 1.3. The rest is still TLS 1.2. But it's TLS 1.2 that provides perfect forward secrecy. So in the TLS 1.2 standard, there were getting on for 100 plus different cipher suites, most of which used RSA key exchange, which had the problem we've already talked about. But there were some that used Diffie-Hellman key exchange and provided perfect forward secrecy. And recommendations for a well-configured TLS server today are that you only support TLS 1.3 or TLS 1.2, but only TLS 1.2 cipher suites that give you perfect forward secrecy. So anyone who's running a properly configured server, even if it's running TLS 1.2, it's exactly the same as if it was running 1.3. There'll only be cipher suites with PFS. Therefore, you have to be in line between the client and the server.
All right, that's incredibly important, and I hope everyone picked that up. So, in essence, unless we change our approach on how we monitor 1.3, we are not going to be able to decrypt the traffic the way that most of our existing tools today traditionally, and the way they traditionally work. So 1.3 requires decryption devices to be an active component in the encryption chain, meaning all your tools you have that currently do their own decryption. If one of them fails, that takes down your network from that point going forward. That's a big point, and I think this is one of those key reasons why a lot of people have went down the path of 1.3, had some trouble, and then backed it back out. So through proper planning, and we'll get into how we can help here in a few minutes. But Chris, when we're looking at how we do an approach to monitoring enterprise traffic, while we're using 1.3, what happens to the performance of the network and the applications when we throw all this potential inline decryption in play from all these tools?
Yeah, so when you move to 1.3, as you talked about, Scott and David, you have to be physically active in line to be able to achieve this. So again, we talked previously, folks would typically use an out of band approach. So you could put a tap in and non-intrusive and get a copy of that traffic. So it's a very standard approach. So as you mentioned, now that people are moving to go actively in line, you always have to balance network uptime with security. So if you want to be able to achieve TLS 1.3 decryption, but also look at making sure you're maintaining and guaranteeing network uptime, the technology that we use is called a bypass tap, is the fundamental tech. And so bypass tap technologies, if you're not familiar with it, it's different than a passive tap. So as I mentioned, a passive tap, traffic flows through it and we provide a copy. When you start deploying active inline devices, we have external bypass tap technology that allows you to essentially take the network traffic, bring it into the tap, and then instead of just passing the traffic on the live network, we'll bring the traffic into the tap. We'll then pass it through your inline device, and we do that in both directions. And what's nice about the bypass tap, it now gives you full control to maintain and support the inline device. So, as an example, if everything's running fine and you need to do some updates, or perhaps you need to do some troubleshooting, or maybe you want to update a appliance, an inline appliance that you're utilizing, you can do this with a bypass tap very easily. So I can take an inline device that's deployed, and with an external bypass tap, I can actually go to the bypass tap and say, take the inline device offline. And at that point, you could do your updates, or maybe you have to do some maintenance, or you have to do some troubleshooting. So it gives you full flexibility and control. And the days of just having out of band monitoring is really going away. So when we talk about deploying inline devices, it's not just the decryption solution, but there's a lot of products that are deployed in line, like intrusion prevention systems. You may have your web application firewalls. You may have your IPSs, DDoS. So there's a lot of different appliances now that are deployed actively in line. So we could take that a little farther, and with bypass and packet broker technology combined, we can actually make it, you can make it easily where you can deploy one or multiple inline devices, manage them independently, but be able to balance the network uptime. So the key here is, architecting your network to ensure that, right, all the traffic gets passed through your decryption and your security tools, and but be able to do that in a way that you can, if you need to, take these devices offline anytime. And again, it could just be for troubleshooting, right? So if you decrypt traffic, pass it through another device, and then re-encrypt it, and there's a network issue, you can easily take those offline momentarily just to, figure out what's going on. So again, our focus is, figuring out the best way to connect up your security stack, which can involve your out-of-band tools as well as your in-band. So it's, it's critical that, the infrastructure piece is taken care of, because that's what will allow people to sleep at night, that, they're not going to get a call, and, the network's going to be down and there's nothing they can do about it. By putting this infrastructure in, it gives them 100% control of their security tools and monitoring tools, with, achieving the network uptime that everybody expects these days.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So given this fundamental change in how we need to monitor our networks, Axellio, Garland, and Mira have joined forces, and we've provided a centralized, scalable, and affordable solution to easily decrypt all your traffic and allow your current, and we'll kind of underline that, your current network analysis and performance tools to function as they do today. So not needing to get new tools to allow you to manage 1.3, you can use your existing tools. So this joint solution ensures complete network visibility by capturing, decrypting, storing, and distributing your data at speeds over 100 gigabit per second. So that allows to make sure that, hey, we've got a lot of folks that, have different network speeds. Even for those of you that are running those big networks, we can handle that. So let's do a quick walkthrough of the architecture. You guys can see the graphic up on your screen today. First and foremost, this is a block diagram, folks. It's meant to be representational. Our solutions can exist in both software and hardware, can be on-prem or in the cloud. So, the physical instantiations of how this might come together are they can vary slightly, but we wanted to show you a little bit on how this could be put together. And, the block diagram is usually a pretty easy way to represent how this might work. So if we kind of start from the bottom left of the graphic, you'll see encrypted traffic coming in from the left and entering Garland's EdgeLens product. This is, as Chris just said, this is the combined hybrid bypass tap and network packet broker that is deployed in line at strategic points in the network to capture all the essential traffic. EdgeLens then passes that encrypted traffic up to Mira's encrypted traffic orchestration, or ETO, as shown in the graphic. ETO will decrypt any encrypted traffic at scale. You'll also see the decrypted traffic in green being passed to your active or inline security analysis systems. But ETO also passes that decrypted traffic over to Axellio's Packet Express. Packet Express provides high-speed, application-agnostic, open platform that simultaneously ingests, stores, and distributes all of these packets to your passive security monitoring tools, or any other service that needs the data. This allows your existing systems to keep up with any traffic by feeding them the data at the rates they can reliably ingest, and buffering any network traffic spikes that need to from the real-time storage. And by ingesting and storing these packets, it provides a data store for your analysts to go back in time. So think, forensics here, to review the packets for forensic analysis as well. So if you're just looking at metadata and your tools are looking at metadata, you find something of interest, you want to go back and look at the real packets. You can go back in time. You can use the Packet Express almost like a DVR. Go back in time and grab the packets that are of importance based on what you saw out of your metadata, and really understand what is going on. So by utilizing this type of architecture, you don't have to have multiple security tools each doing their own decryption. We're handling that for you and allowing your tools to really work the way they are today. So let's get into a little bit more detail. Chris, we'll start with you and kind of walk us through the Garland portion of the graphic here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Scott was talking about, so think of Garland Technology as your infrastructure play. So we're getting physically connected, actively in line between your network devices, as shown in the diagram. So at the bottom of the diagram is where, this is where you're going to have a, network tap device between two network devices. And a couple things to note just on the tapping side is that, the tap also has, built-in fail-safe, or if for some reason, the device were to get unpowered, which probably wouldn't happen, but if it did, you have an option where it can fail open, so traffic can still continue to flow. So we don't become a failure point at the tapping piece. But it's really critical here that we're going to be put in line. Our bypass taps have fail-safe built into them, and so this now gives you the ability to take that traffic, and as Scott mentioned, in this solution, it's a combination of a bypass tap and packet broker. So when we get a copy of the traffic, we then pass that traffic into the Mira ETO appliance. And then if you have additional inline tools that want to do active monitoring and blocking, we can actually put those into series, so a chaining series. So traffic comes into the bypass tap, we input the data into the Mira ETO, and then from there, we can pass that traffic through your intrusion prevention or your WAF or your firewall. And a couple of things to keep in mind is we actually allow you, as shown at the top here, the IPS, the WAF, the firewall, we allow you to manage those devices individually. So this is important. So even though everything is actively aligned with the edge lens, you can actually say remove the IPS from the service chain. So again, updates, troubleshooting, hardware replacement. So you do this without any interruption on your network. So now we bring the traffic in, it gets decrypted, and then we can pass it through your inline devices, manage each one of those independently. Now, when we're tapping into higher speed networks like 100 gigabit, what's important here as well is your inline device may actually not be able to keep up with the line rates. So what we can also do is when we add in an entity like intrusion prevention, and let's just say that your IPS can only handle, let's just say 40 gigs of traffic, and you have up to 100 gigs of traffic that you need to monitor actively in line, we can actually load balance the 3 intrusion prevention systems and keep those session aware. So again, traffic comes into the Mira box. We then pass it through your 3 IPSs that are load balanced. And then let's just say your WAF can handle the full loaded traffic. So we could then just pass it through one entity of the WAF. And then we can send the traffic back to Mira ETO to re-encrypt the traffic. So that would be handling your active inline devices. So again, making sure that we provide fail-safe at your live network connection, so we're not a failure point. And then we go, give you the ability to control each of your inline devices independently. And then what we can also do is we can take a copy of that traffic and also send that to Axellio and your out-of-band tools. So, think of us as, part of your security stack, and really helping provide you a best practice for easily connecting up your in-band blocking tools as well as all your out-of-band, and do this in a easy, simple, cost-effective way. And we're proud also to say, these are originally Garland, Texas, but now we're in Richardson, but northern Dallas. But these are designed, manufactured right in the USA as well. So we're proud of that. But think of us as the glue that really gets everything connected, guarantees all the packets get sent to your inline and out-of-band tools, but also allow you to manage each one of these devices independently. So again, it's providing that balance of network uptime and ensuring your in-band and your out-of-band tools can easily get connected to your network and never, become a failure point. So Scott, that's just a quick overview of where Garland fits in and how we really help instrument your security stack in an efficient way, maintaining network uptime.
Great stuff, Chris. Thanks. David, do you want to walk us through ETO's role and how it works at the really high network speeds?
Yeah, sure, Scott. I think one thing I just pick up on that you mentioned earlier that I think is important here is that in the solution that we're looking at, the ETO, the Mira product, is doing the decryption encryption, and everything after that, everything above that in the picture, is receiving decrypted traffic. And you made the point earlier that you don't want to have multiple security tools each trying to do decryption because they're all in line. And that's a valid point. If any one of them fails, it breaks the chain. Although you could address that with the edge lens as Chris has outlined. But there's another reason you don't want to have multiple tools doing decrypt as well. And that is that effectively each of the tools has to become a bump in the wire between itself and the next tool. And the TLS handshake is now no longer from the client to ETO and ETO to the server. Each of those inline tools, if they did their own decrypt, has to have a TLS handshake with the next tool in the chain. And you end up with a huge dependency of trust for certificates between each of the tools. So it rapidly gets unmanageable and very messy. So the solution that we have here and the way that we recommend that this is always done is that you have a single point where you do decrypt and re-encrypt, which is the ETO. And then the tools themselves never need to worry about decryption and encryption, which means typically they'll run faster anyway. When you turn on their capability, if they have it, to do decrypt, it slows them down. So in the model that we see here, as Chris says, the encrypted flow comes into the Mira ETO, and we send out encrypted flow on the other side of Mira ETO onto the destination. During the TLS handshake, that communication needs to take place between the client, ETO, and the server. So those TLS handshake packets come in from Garland to us. They go out from us to Garland and off to the server during that handshake. So the tools don't see the TLS handshake at all. But once the handshake has taken place and we're decrypting, the tools then just see the decrypted flow. So the tool doesn't get confused because it sees a TLS handshake and then it gets unencrypted data. It just sees a TCP flow that contains unencrypted data. So it makes life very simple, and you don't need any special software on the tools themselves. As Chris says, you can use the chaining on inline tools attached to us. By default, Mira ETO only supports a single inline tool. So using the edge lens, you can expand that to a chain of inline tools. And then ETO also provides interfaces that can feed what we call passive tools. So that would be something like Axellio. So in this picture, you can see the feed to Axellio comes from edge lens, which is a perfectly valid way of doing it. But you could also take an interface on the ETO itself and connect that direct to edge lens if you wanted to, and it would give it the passive feed. The difference between inline tools and passive tools is that the inline tools could modify the data while it's decrypted. And then that modification, when it comes back to ETO, will be re-encrypted and sent on to the destination. So effectively, what the client sent is not going to be what the server received, and vice versa. Now, for a lot of applications, IPS, for example, that's exactly what you want. The IPS is going to remove a threat and protect your security. But there are some environments where modifying the data while it's decrypted is against the regulatory regime that you're working within. So financial services would be a good example of that. And in that use case, ETO has the capability to allow the decrypted traffic to go through a chain of tools, but when it comes back, what will get re-encrypted and sent on its way is not the decrypted data that may have been modified, it's the original data that came in from the client. So in that mode of operation, you're guaranteeing that what the client sends is always what the server receives and vice versa, but you have the flexibility to choose that. The other thing that I'd mention in ETO is that there are lots of tools that can do decryption. The mechanisms are pretty well known, but actually we would argue that we spend a lot of time and effort making sure that we do decryption that's safe and secure. And what we mean by that is that when a TLS session gets set up from the client to the server and we aren't there, the TLS version, the cipher suite, the key size, etc., for that connection is negotiated between the client and the server, and it results in a security profile for that connection. When you put Mira ETO in line and we become a control man in the middle and decrypt, that TLS handshake will result in exactly the same security profile. It'll be the same version of TLS, the same cipher suite, the same key sizes as if we weren't present. So we don't degrade the security profile of the end-to-end connection. And that isn't true for all solutions that do decryption. Quite often you'll find solutions that where the connection when it's not present would be TLS 1.3. When the solution's present, it will force it down to TLS 1.2 because that makes life easier for the decryption appliance. In our books, that's a no-no. You shouldn't degrade the security profile. So that's really a summary of what we're doing here. And if we just look at the next slide, you can see we provide multiple ways of doing this. ETO is essentially software. So we deliver that as virtual instances on KVM or Proxmox or VMware. We also have virtual instances running in AWS public cloud, but the same software can run on a range of hardware platforms. The only real difference in terms of how you deploy this is the performance you can get. So on the virtual appliances, we can go up to 5 gigs of decrypt in a single instance. On the hardware appliances, depending which model, we can go up to 50 gigs of decrypt. In fact, the 7 series, we've tested that up to 100 gigs, but at the moment we only provide decrypt licenses for up to 50 gig. And likewise with the virtual, we max out the licensing at 5 gigs at the moment, although we know we can get 10 in some instances. So you can pick and choose the mechanism you want to deploy and the platform, but the performance that you get is determined by the decrypt license that you install on the product. So in a virtual appliance, it costs you nothing for the appliance because you're running it on your own hardware. But you pay for a subscription for a decrypt license, and it could be for 500 megs or a gig or 2 gigs or 5 gigs. On the hardware appliances, you're buying the appliance once, but then it's an annual subscription license for the decrypt capability. And the nice thing with that is if your decrypt requirement changes, you've licensed a 3 series box at 5 gig, and then you need 10 gig of decrypt. You don't change the hardware, you just pay for an upgrade to the license, install a new license, and it'll decrypt 10 gigs of traffic for you. So it's a very easy deployment mechanism. And the last thing to say before I'll let Scott talk about Axellio is ETO is a transparent device. So we're layer 2 transparent. You don't need to re-architect the network at all. You just break a cable or break a virtual wire and insert us in there. So there's no IP addresses associated with the ports. We don't change, we're not doing that or any routing or any of those sorts of things. It's very easy to deploy. And if you're using tunnels or VLANs or VXLAN or whatever to create overlay structures in your network, we handle all of those transparently. You don't need to terminate them and re-originate them. We just become a bump in the tunnel the same way we're a bump in the wire. So hopefully that helps put in place what we do.
All right, thanks, David. So on the Axellio side, you'll see our portion kind of in the upper right-hand corner of the screen there. Packet Express forms a buffer between the collection and the decrypted infrastructure. It ensures that your monitoring applications you're utilizing today sees the right traffic at the speed that they can consume. So if your network gets a spike and it spikes up to 40 gig and your tools can do 30, your tools are not going to get overloaded with data. But let's kind of take a quick look at the innovation behind Packet Express and how it works. For decades, industry struggled with the read-write challenge. You could read, but you couldn't write, or you could write, but you couldn't read. And it didn't really allow for simultaneous reading and writing to disk, which fundamentally created a slower and bulkier solution. It's no longer the case, with where we need to be as a country, as a nation, as companies operating out there, because we're all operating in the high-speed world. We need our solutions to be keeping up with these really high network speeds that we're seeing today. So Axellio innovated. Our software enables extreme high-speed, multi-petabyte, and simultaneous read and write storage that captures and distributes any time series data. Obviously, we're focusing on the network packet side here, but we could do any time series data, audio, video, RF, you name it. As this is time addressable storage, we can store and distribute multiple streams. So this radically speeds up your analytic processes. So we've buffered and decoupled your ingest from your distribution. So if you've got multiple analytic tools that need the same data at the same time, they can come in and grab the same data at the same time without any speed impacts on your ingestion side. And then you can push the data, you can pull the data, you can allow your tools to say, hey, only give me X amount of data, so that that buffering capability that Axellio provides can ensure that any spikes in network traffic speed don't once again come down and hit your tools the way you don't want them to be hit. So that buffer offers a lot of capabilities to make sure that all of your tools are operating at the best speed that they can. On the passive cybersecurity monitoring side, Packet Express ensures that any number of monitoring applications can see, just what they want. And they can do this up to, we can collect, like I said before, in a 1U, 100 gigabit, and then we can distribute 200 gigabit to those tools. So this can really operate at high speeds. We have a licensing model similar to what David just spoke about, where we're not going to charge someone that's only running 10 gig the same price as we charge someone that's running 100 gig. So we allow for to ensure that you're only paying for what you're utilizing. The data can be stored as long or short as you want. It allows you to rewind and replay the traffic for repeated in-depth forensic analysis if needed. It's basically a DVR for your packets. It gives your cybersecurity analyst immense power to track down anomalies in the network, test out possible security mitigations prior to pushing something out to your larger network. Gives you just a lot of flexibility. It also has the ability to compress and encrypt the data as well. So we're talking about, hey, we're getting a copy from EdgeLens over, it's decrypted, we're looking at it, so now we have another big data store of decrypted data. Well, not necessarily, because we can encrypt that data as well, making sure that you're not leaving anything on your network unencrypted. So it offers the ability to compress that data as well. So depending upon the formation of your packets and what you're pulling in, you can get some decent compression ratios in there, allowing you to store a lot more data than what you need. You can archive data off of the real-time tier as well, giving you a longer look back if that is needed for your particular business. So those were kind of the prepared kind of questions that we had. We wanted to run a little bit, right around an hour, and we're sitting at that stage. Let me first open it up to Chris and David to see if they have any last comments, and then we'll take a few questions if anyone has some, and then we'll get it turned back over to Ed. So Chris, any last comments?
Yeah, just obviously if folks have any questions about best practices for connecting up security tools and best way to get access to that data, as I started with, I think everybody agrees, right? The truth is in the packets, and so as a combined effort, and Ed mentioned this too, we're a piece of the puzzle. So we're very much about the foundation, the physical layer, maintaining network uptime, and so our whole practice is around network instrumentation of connecting monitoring tools, security tools, performance monitoring, packet capture, and so if anybody wants to dive into those topics in more detail, feel free to reach out anytime, and really appreciate everybody's time today, and appreciate Ed getting this coordinated.
Great, thanks, Chris.
Guys, I do have a question. So, and this is Ed from SOSEC. So given the customer, let's say the defense area, let's say these cyber protection teams, let's say they're more so doing far more forensics analysis than real time, whether it's on, in the field or on the BDP. Let's just assume most of it is, if not the majority, is forensics, looking back at the past. what you're talking about here really lends itself exceedingly well to getting into the real-time area. Is that a fair statement?
Yes and no. I mean, the whole fact of, if you look at the architecture, and we've got the inline security monitoring tools and the passive security monitoring tools, all that passive security monitoring, being able to store that for some period of time, and that period of time is completely, very mission dependent. By storing that in Packet Express, that gives you your look back, right? So you've got tools, you've got, everyone is utilizing multiple passive security monitoring tools these days, sometimes over even 10 of them. Most of them are looking at tools that are looking at metadata. That metadata points to something that is askew, something that catches their eye, something that is that they need to dig into more. Well, the ability to now go back in time and look at those packets, go back and do the comparisons, pull it out, and having the full packet available to you is incredibly important to your analysts to be able to have that ability to replay the traffic at whatever speed they need to. And if you don't have that data, or that data is encrypted and goes through the wire, your analysts are dead in the water. They don't have any ability, and they're only going to have, what might have popped up in front of them. So having that ability to go back in time, I think, is critical here.
Sure. So back in time is critical. Agreed. And I'm saying let's assume that's where most of the work is being done by our analysts and teams today. There is seemingly a push to go more real time and let's just say in the intelligence community, let's just say they've been doing that for a long time, right? So there seems to be a push, or maybe things that are being heard, a push for more real-time monitoring is becoming more imperative and heading in that direction. But then again, what you all spoke to today, which was impressive, was the risks of trying to do things real time. What are they? Performance, lines dropping, and that kind of thing. But what I see is an impressive composition of capability here, where minimizing the drop lines, minimizing performance impacts are really given a great deal of attention with the combination of what you all are showing here. So that to me is pretty impressive if you're moving, especially into real-time kind of inline monitoring. And
I think one thing to say, Ed, is that, I mean, to a degree, whether you look at the decrypted data in real time or not, you still have to be doing the decryption in real time, because you have to be actively present during the handshake when it happens to be able to get the capability to decrypt. So, the picture we've shown, you're quite correct. It supports both decryption that feeds inline tools that want to do real time, things like IPSs, but it also supports feeding passive tools that could be doing real time, but maybe capturing and storing and doing after the fact. They're both supported, and you can adjust the weighting in terms of the tools that are attached. But the bit you can't get away from is that the element that's doing the decrypt is always going to do that decrypt in real time, because it's got to be there to get the session keys during the handshake while it happens. And then it can use those session keys to decrypt the flow as it continues through the device. What happens with the decrypted output from that decryptor is the balance you're talking about. How much of that is just captured for later forensic analysis, or how much is fed through real-time tools that act on it when they see an issue. But even if, in the past you could have done passive decrypt of TLS 1.2 with RSA, and in that scenario you were just capturing the packet streams, and you could go back and look at them a week later, as long as you have the service certificate and private key. But you can't do that with TLS 1.3. So the actual control man in the middle and the decryption itself is always going to be a real-time operation. What you do with it after that is up to your choice of tools. Does that make sense?
Sure,
And,
David. Yeah. I mean, well, and so what I'm thinking is also on the other side of this equation altogether, the adversary. So when they're looking at what they're up against, it is all that 1.3 has to offer, if that's what the network is running on, right? And so from their view of it, they're looking at where is the vulnerability, where is the exposure, where is the area of penetration that they can play out for what they want, and that's what's the other, that's what's on the other side of this capability. So this is an impressive compilation of capabilities that's fitting nicely to fit in the hands of the soldier who's with their chief warrant officers, and with these soldiers who are on the cyber protection teams to go after and determine what they're dealing with.
And Ed, just one comment on our side too is, for more field operations, we also have smaller flyaway kit hardware applications that are smaller fit, lighter weight, to also achieve this, on the go as well. So just, mentioning what you're speaking about, I thought it'd be important just to mention that, that we can get this, put in a flyaway kit as well, for, on the go applications for missions.
Yeah, and Ed, I think you bring up the real point of why we thought this was really important to pull together is we all know, I mean, we all see the same cybersecurity reports that come out seeming like every week, and regardless, every one of them say that the adversary is getting in. They're getting into the network. Numerous ways, whether, probably be the top is phishing, but they're getting into the network. Well, once they're in the network and they can, maybe steal some credentials, start operating on that network, looking like a normal user, perhaps. Well, now they're hiding in the same encrypted traffic that everyone else is. So how do you find them? If you're not decrypting that traffic, if you're not looking for those anomalies in the traffic, and you're just saying, hey, it's TLS 1.3, everything's encrypted, we're good. You're giving yourself a really false sense of security, because we know that the adversaries will get in. So you have to figure out a way to monitor your architecture inside the network. And the only way to do that is to really start looking at that traffic. And I think a lot of folks are doing that with 1.2. When you move to 1.3, this is why we felt it was really important to make sure that folks can still utilize those same tools they're using today to look at their internal network monitoring, even though going to 1.3 helps them with additional security.
So what I hear you saying is it's imperative to consider 1.3. And number two, it's imperative, if you go to 1.3, to make sure that you can defend it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Pretty amazing what I'm hearing, guys.
Thanks. I want to come back to David real quick to see, David, did you have any last comments you wanted to toss in? All right.
Or any other questions from the audience, I think is where you're probably going next. Any other questions from the audience? Yeah. Very good.
Okay. Well, let me, for Axellio and Garland and Mira, let me thank SOSEC for giving us the time to present today. Ed, I appreciate you reaching out for this. This was great. And to all the audience, You'll see on the screen specific contact us information that you can utilize to reach out to any one of the three companies. We talk often, so if you reach out to one of us, we'll certainly talk to the others. And for those of you on the SOSEC distro, you'll get a copy of the presentation materials here. If you're not part of SOSEC and you reach out, we'll be more than happy to provide you with the information. So Ed, I'll turn the floor back over to you.
Sure.
Yeah, my apologies for dropping off then, but I just lost power, but it's back now.
Thanks, David. Did you have any closing comments?
No, other than thank everyone for attending, and if you've got questions, use the links in the slides and we'll be happy to talk.
Okay, Ed, back over to you.
Okay, Scott, thank you. David, thank you. Thanks for jumping back on. So let me just close this out here. Let me just share. SOSEC does welcome participation in companies, our members actually hosting these events. Consortium membership is required to host a cyber talk. Reach out to myself, and we can discuss getting on the schedule for yourselves to host a cyber talk. These events are intended to be informational and educational, and less so salesy, so that's kind of the intent of a cyber talk. So now for non-members of outside the consortium, they are welcome to attend any of our cyber talks. In fact, these cyber talks are open to the public domain. While we do invite individuals from Defense Cyber Operations and Army Cyber, we do publicly offer anyone to attend these events through LinkedIn and other public invitations that go out. So let me just say a few things then about the slide you're looking at. The benefit of participating in membership is getting access to OTAs from 9 of our government sponsors across the Air Force, the Army, and NGA. Teaming it's actually a requirement of the OTA. So if you're traditional, you're required to have a certain contribution by non-traditionals. And if you're a non-traditional, as you saw and heard today, this is a great example of teaming where the value is extremely high for a capability to be used with the benefit of multiple non-traditionals contributing to the capability. So this is a great example of teaming. So I want to commend Axellio for that. So the process for these OTAs are very streamlined. They can be very, very fast. And because the government is the government, they still can take quite some time. And with government funding the way it was the last 18 months, it has been a great demonstration of how slow things could actually be. So there's also flexible treatment of intellectual property that we administer when we negotiate a contract for a down select member on an award. And there is an option we have on this particular OTA that with the approval of the DCOPM, outside government agencies can make use of this OTA. So we have a number of examples on the COBRA OTA where other organizations have come and made use of the OTA, but it operates the same as if DCO is operating it. And then we also have a very a value added feature of our OTA, which most OTAs have now, is the ability, if the prototype is successful, the government can take it to production or mission if it chooses, and it can also proceed with an ATO for that deployment. So with that, if you're interested in membership, feel free to go to the Join tab on the sosecinc.com and follow the instructions there to apply for membership. And if you have any questions about that, Alex Como is the member, leads our membership team. So you can reach out to him if you have questions, and he can provide assistance, or myself, and between the two of us, we can help you with your questions. So let me share that our next Cyber Talk on June 6th is with BugCrowd, and BugCrowd will join us for a joint presentation featuring Office of the Secretary of Defense with Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office, or CDAO, and that is with their Directorate of Digital Services, DDS. Their event topic is Asymmetric Advantage. The crowd is a force multiplier. That with BugCrowd, again, who is a member of the consortium. So if you're a member of SOSEC consortium, as Scott had mentioned, you'll get these announcements directly or automatically, and you're welcome to join any of our Cyber Talks and reach out to us if you're interested in doing a Cyber Talk. So I want to thank Axellio, Scott Aiken, Garland Technology, Mira Security for today's Cyber Talk and leading this teaming discussion in support of TLS 1.3. Guys, very interesting, very strong, very comprehensive, and actually for a technical area of a topic, very well presented to follow. So I appreciate for our audience and for the recording of this event, which will go out to all of our members tomorrow. And so that will be posted on our website about midday tomorrow. And anybody can go there in the public domain. There's a public side to our portal. And there's also the member side who can reach out to get a copy of these slides. If you're interested in a copy of the recording, reach out to any of the Axellio folks that are on this distribution, and they can get you a copy of that recording. We'll provide that to them by the morning. Okay, we'll remain on the session for a couple of minutes for our audience remaining. If there's any questions, feel free to ask. But otherwise, I think we're completed for the day, and I hope no one complains about getting back 40 minutes to the day. Any questions from anybody about any of these companies, what you heard, SOSEC? Any questions? Very good. David, got to show us a way back to your front door out there across the big Atlantic.
Hang on a second.
Scott, thanks very much. Brought in a nice, clear message today.
Thanks, Ed. We appreciate the platform.
Very good. I don't hear any questions, so I think we're done.
All right. Excellent.
All right, guys.
Appreciate everybody's time. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.